Hey guys, it's Jack. I wanted to let you know that we're starting a new push for subscriptions here on Human Events Daily. So make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you hit subscribe, you download it, and you share it with 5 of your friends. Make sure they're all going and downloading as well, because we need to get the signal out as much as possible. Look, we've done so much over the past couple of years since this show started, and we're only going to do so much more. Let's get it.
Call this the Jack Posobiec Appreciation Hour. I can say confidently, I think Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential nominee if it wasn't for Jack Posobiec. And that is, I'm being honest.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec, we're back live here at Human Events Daily. Our guest is Andrew Day from the American Conservative. And Andrew, so we've just walked through the unique threats, the asymmetric threats in the Middle East. Of course, all this comes down to oil. And one of the phrases I like to use on the program is when you're dealing with geopolitics, cherchez le pétrole, look for the oil. And this is exactly where the threats come in when we're dealing with the Middle East, because it's not just a military question. That's what makes it an economic question. And this, of course, is the situation the administration has found themselves bound up in. And so when we look at, as you say, the memorandum of understanding obviously did not hold. Are there pieces from it that could be brought forward potentially? And really, when it comes down to it, what are the impediments to peace here? It seems to me like the administration and the Gulf allies are very interested in turning the page on this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that the entire MOU potentially could still hold. I mean, there is a chance that Iran and the U.S. return to the MOU and maybe clarify some of its language so that there's not this misunderstanding or ambiguity on the issues at the Strait of Hormuz in Lebanon. That's one possibility. I think that would probably be a good thing. It would lock in Iran's nuclear program, because I believe under the MOU they committed to not advancing it, which is difficult for them to do now anyway, because the Trump administration genuinely did a lot of damage to their nuclear infrastructure. And you mentioned that the oil situation is top of mind right now, and that's an economic problem. That's also a political problem, because oftentimes with wars, it's kind of difficult to explain to Americans why those foreign wars in these faraway places that they normally don't think a lot about are connected to their interests. But with this war, it's not difficult at all, because we started the war in late February, and then very soon thereafter, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz effectively, and then the gasoline prices in America went up. Those prices obviously are displayed prominently on like every street in the country. So people recognize that. They recognize that it was because of the Iran war that happened. And that's a big part of why this war has been unpopular among the American people. And so it's part of the political analysis for the Trump administration that goes toward ending the war. But another big problem is basically the Israel lobby. I don't know if you use that phrase, but I think it's kind of unavoidable to use it in this particular context, because the Israel lobby advances what they perceive to be the interests of Israel. And Israel thinks that this is very bad for them. They wanted this war in the first place because Iran is a regional adversary, the chief regional adversary of Israel. Right? It's not the chief adversary of the United States. We're a superpower surrounded by Canada, Mexico, and fish, basically. And Iran's a middle power on the other side of the war. So we didn't perceive any major threat, certainly not an imminent one coming from Iran, but Iran is perceived by Israel to be a threat. And that's a big part of the reason that we got into this. And it's also a big part of the reason that it's difficult for Trump to end it. I had a column out today at the American Conservative. It's called Israel Vetoes Trump in the Middle East Again. I would encourage people to read it. And I just walked through some recent developments in which President Trump has tried to get something done in the Middle East, and then there was a big uproar from Israel and its American supporters, and then he had to walk it back. So the most recent example pertains to Gaza. President Trump has this board of peace, which he oversees, which is trying to get some sort of stable peace deal in Gaza, some sort of arrangement that's good for Palestinians and Israelis. He announced, I think last week or a couple of weeks ago, and the board of peace announced that they had come to some sort of deal where, as Hamas disarmed, Israel was going to withdraw its forces. Israel came out and said, actually, we don't like that. We want Hamas to withdraw or to disarm, and then we will withdraw. And then the Board of Peace changed its position. They changed what they said the deal was. It's very similar to what we saw last month when President Trump announced a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia to get that kingdom a civilian nuclear energy program. There was pushback from the Israelis. They don't want to see any other country in the region have a nuclear program. And so President Trump had to walk it back the next day and say, actually, Saudi Arabia needs to normalize its relations with Israel before we can do this. And then another example is very relevant to this Iran war. Early in President Trump's administration, he wanted to get a nuclear deal with Iran to stop it from getting a nuclear weapon, to just block that path so that it would be impossible. And his administration had signaled that they would be okay with Iran continuing to enrich uranium at levels that are not nearly high enough for weaponization to make a nuclear bomb with, but are just high enough to have, civilian electricity, basically. That was the administration's position as far as I could tell. Steve Witkoff said that that was the position. But then the Israel lobby really had a lot of pushback. Netanyahu was relentless. AIPAC, FDD, this think tank, the very hawkish think tank, they didn't like that at all. And then President Trump's administration basically moved the goalposts and said Iran needed to have zero enrichment, which was a non-starter for Iran. They were never going to agree with that, according to their own statements and according to Iran experts. And that's really what broke up the agreement and set us on this path toward what Israel wants to be a regime change war. So if Trump tries to get out of this, Israel is going to they're going to freak out. They're not going to like that at all. They wanted a situation in the Middle East where the Arab countries were aligned with Israel against Iran. And what this is shaping up to be is a Middle East where Iran is more integrated with the Arab countries and with Turkey. And those countries are very wary of Israel and think that has caused a big mess in their neighborhood.
Well, and the way I've always put it is like this, is that Israel has different interests than the United States. It's every country has different interests than the United States. They have their interests. We have our interests. J.D. Vance has pointed this out as well as the vice president. And also and by the way, this is also the current government of Israel as well. And so Bibi Netanyahu, for example, he's in a very slim electoral coalition in control of parliament right now as the prime minister. And they have an election coming up in about 2 months' time, give or take. I believe it's October, where their election's coming up. And so that's one of the main reasons that he's pushing for a lot of this to keep going, because he wants to be able to say that I kept the United States in, I kept the United States in this fight, I kept the United States pushing and escalating with Iran, because he's not only is it in their geopolitical interest in their view, but it's also in his political interests, because and it's really been that relationship that he has with President Trump that he's been reminding voters of. That's why he went to the White House and held the meeting recently. That's why Zelensky was there as well, even though Zelensky kind of wasn't able to seal the deal in terms of getting much support in terms of the asks, Patriot missiles and licenses and all these things. But so there's a whole electoral context to this that I just really feel gets kind of missed from the Western discussion of this. But if you just go and read like Times of Israel or Jerusalem Post or any of these outlets that are actually in Israel, you could see that they have a very robust conversation about it all the time. Naftali Bennett is running against Bibi Netanyahu right now, and he's saying that, this guy isn't able to get it done and all the rest. So this is a guy who's fighting for his political future. And by the way, also potentially faces this criminal case that could potentially come in because he loses immunity after but I'm talking about in Israel. I'm not talking about the international court one that could potentially kick in if he's not prime minister anymore. So there's all of these pressures going on within Israel that totally seem to get lost from the conversation, because we'll talk about the Iranian system all day long, but why don't we talk about this as well? It just seems like it's fair game.
Yeah, totally. I think that October election is a very important detail to pay attention to. And it's come to be the case that Prime Minister Netanyahu's political interests are aligned with continued war, and especially keeping the U.S. involved in backing these Israeli wars against its enemies, namely in this case, Iran, but also this so-called axis of resistance that is aligned with Iran. And, Bibi Netanyahu is Mr. Security. That is his brand within Israeli domestic politics. So it's very important for him that he can kind of cash in on that and say, see, I actually do provide security. And that became obviously more difficult after the Hamas atrocities in 2023. And so he's really leaning into a more hardline militaristic foreign policy to kind of overcome the potential reputational damage from that. We should also go back all the way to 1996, I believe it was, when Netanyahu had authored for him something called the Clean Break Memo by his American neoconservative advisors.
It is,
in which they said
we've actually done literally almost out of time for the show, but we've done full episodes on Clean Break and over the summer, or excuse me, over the winter break, and I hope people can go back and check that out. Andrew, where can people follow you?
You can follow me on X at AKDay89, or you could just go to the American Conservative website. I have a weekly column there, and we run a bunch of good stuff. I'm also the senior editor there.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, 2 elections going on, different things happening. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
Communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. And folks, Allegiance Gold is one of the big supporters of the coverage on our show here. They're the big supporter of what we do when we're on the ground, when we're going overseas, when we're going potentially into harm's way. And they help us out with our security. They also remind us that security means different things to different people. And whether it's the stories we're covering or the decisions we make for our own families, it's important to think about protecting what we've worked hard to build. That's why I'm especially thankful for Allegiance Gold. We've been working together for the past 5 years, and the relationships like that are not built overnight. They're built on trust, consistency, and showing up for each other. We appreciate their support, and we're proud to have them standing with us. If you'd like to learn more, visit protectwithposo.com. That's protectwithposo.com, or call 844-577-POSO to learn more. All right, wanted to get in now, folks, on this question of Iran, where we're at, a potential deal, and even the Strait of Hormuz and where everything is at. And in fact, so I was on Timcast IRL last night and kind of broke down a little bit of an analysis because I was asked the question of what I thought would come next. And so here's what I said. So there's territorial waters there. If you look at it, one is Iran, one is Oman. And of course, it's been governed by the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. And so as an international transit waterway. And so, but effectively, what's been going on? So effectively, in the past, it was just sort of open, right? But there was only dredged in the center because the large tankers weren't able to get through the large hole, especially when it's full, so it's going to be lower. And so with the super tankers, but now the Omanis have kind of cleared out a route that's completely to the south, and because they call it the hugging Oman route. And the reason that matters is because it doesn't stray into Iranian waters at all. And so they're saying, hey, if this thing doesn't go into Iranian waters, what is your claim for messing with the shipping? Well, Iran, of course, is saying we want to control all shipping and we want to control all trade through that. And so what seems to be happening, at least as far as I know, I haven't, I don't have any direct information as to the current negotiations that are taking place. But what seems to be happening is this sort of dual route scenario, like you say, like a northern route, southern route. All right. And so come in to weigh in on that, we've got Andrew Day. He's the senior editor of The American Conservative. Andrew, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so Andrew, I mean that's just kind of my spitballing, reading the tea leaves. Like I said, I could be completely wrong, but on how it shakes out, I think it could be anyone's guess at this time. But the idea being that it seems to me that it's almost like 2 routes seem to be what's opening up, and I wanted to get your take on that and really where things stand in general.
So it's a little unclear at the moment, but right now it seems like Iran and Oman are closing in on some kind of deal to govern how the Strait of Hormuz operates. And under that arrangement, Iran would be coordinating with ships, especially going inbound. Oman would be handling ships outbound, but they would still kind of consult with Iran to get approval for that. So Iran would still be coordinating these routes. They're driving a pretty hard bargain on the Strait of Hormuz, to be honest, especially after the Memorandum of Understanding collapsed over disagreements about Lebanon and Israel's military campaign there, and also disagreements about the Strait of Hormuz. And what I was told from sources who are involved in regional mediation efforts is that Iran is driving a hard bargain on Hormuz, specifically because of the disagreement that emerged over Lebanon on. They wanted to be sure that they maintained control of their leverage. And right now, it does sound like they want to control the Strait of Hormuz, essentially. They want to coordinate with these ships, make them so that the ships have to basically reach out to the IRGC and get some sort of approval. So that's a big ask. And if that arrangement is indeed what we are left with at the end of this war, it's going to get a lot of pushback. It's going to be pretty ugly. But what I would say is people who are upset about that and complaining about that, they're usually misdirecting their anger. The problem is the war itself. It's not that the war is ending, it's that the war started in the first place. Because as you mentioned in that clip, the Strait of Hormuz was open before this war started, and now Iran is driving a hard bargain. It still remains to be seen whether they're going to be charging tolls. They would probably call them some sort of service fee for environmental damages or whatever. I don't think the Trump administration has publicly signaled yet that they would be okay with that, although we did get some comments from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that suggested that they weren't explicitly ruling it out, which is interesting. And we've gotten mixed reporting about whether the Iranians want to do that, but it does seem like they're going to have some sort of control over the Strait of Hormuz, or at least that's what they're angling for here.
Well, that's exactly right. And so that's why, basically that's the status quo ante, right? So the status quo ante, the state of affairs before the conflict took place was that it was this international transit corridor. And what the Iranians have pointed out, and the Omanis have pointed out, that technically there are no international waters here because it's so narrow that this is the territorial waters of each. And under law of the sea, when you have a situation there that two nations' territorial waters meet, then you split the difference basically. And because it's typically 12 nautical miles is the standard on that. And so the point being is that Iran really does have the ability, right? And this is something that I think a lot of people have missed when they were analyzing the situation completely, is that they missed that Iran was able to use their asymmetrical advantage here with this situation to be able to use it to their advantage. And to your point, even if Iran only has a couple of drones left, or only a couple of small boats left with rocket launchers or whatever it is, some small munitions, they're still able to effectuate this level of control over that strait, because it comes down to, and I've said on the program so many times, that it just comes down to, if you're the captain of one of these ships, one of these super tankers, and you've got $1 billion or more in terms of your cargo, and you've got your insurer and your reinsurer, Swiss reinsurance, coming in saying, hey, we don't think you can go through that strait, then you're going to just park. And so this has always been the card that Iran was going to play if they were backed into a corner.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, for as long as there are some guys who have speedboats and shoulder weapons and who work for the Iranians or represent their interest, there's going to be potentially a problem here because they can harass ships. And it's not just a matter of whether a ship can freely transit and kind of make a run for it and get through it. It's a matter of whether the captains of those ships are willing to take that risk. And it's a matter of whether the insurance companies are willing to take that risk. And what we've seen, even when the U.S. said it was going to be helping them transit and coordinating that, giving them an escort, the insurance companies and the captains have generally been unwilling to do this. The Trump administration did a good job of getting some oil out, but it wasn't at levels that we saw before the war, before hostilities. And clearly there's going to have to be some sort of diplomatic arrangement. And what I would point out is just this key point that in war, you need to have an understanding of your strategy. What is the strategic logic of the hostilities you're waging? Because obviously it's true, even with this munitions shortage that everyone is talking about, where we're running out of interceptors and these so-called exquisite munitions, the long-range precision strike missiles, we still could bomb Iran all day, bomb their buildings, kill their leaders or their IRGC members and stuff. But what is the logic of that? Because even if that led to some sort of general collapse of Iran, a country of more than 90 million people, that wouldn't necessarily solve this problem. We could just see terrorists kind of fill the power vacuum, and we would still have this problem that the Strait of Hormuz is just very close to Iran. And so that's why I think this is going to have to end in some kind of diplomatic arrangement. I'm expecting that there would be a lot of pushback on Trump. I imagine that he feels pretty stuck right now. He feels like he's stuck between these different options that are both bad, continuing the war and wasting even more of these munitions that I just mentioned, that would be really bad for American interests. Or getting some sort of arrangement with Iran that they're okay with over the Strait of Hormuz, that's going to be politically very dicey for him. But I think that he should just go for it. And as I mentioned, when these people inevitably start pushing back, we should remind them, this is your fault. This war has been a costly distraction, self-destructive of American power, and otherwise nearly irrelevant to American interests, except to the extent that it has been bad for us as we try to pursue our interests. And the fools and traitors, frankly, and foreign interests who pushed for this war and said that we'd be able to get regime change in just a few weeks and that it was going to be a new regime that loved America or something, they were selling Trump a bill of goods. And now, unfortunately, the bill has come due and it's not what they promised.
And this is where, you mentioned munitions as well, but also this is why when the Saudis called on Saturday, because of course, since we've last spoken, there had been this potential. President was looking at a range of options. He called it a World War II scale attack on Iran. And then, of course, if Iran responded, they came out and said that they were going to strike the Saudi oil fields, that if Iran's energy infrastructure was hit, they were going to hit the Saudis and other Gulf partners as well. And the story we got, and then it later broke, and the president himself actually said this, that when the Saudis called, they said, look, even if we had a full complement of air interceptors, that's the way this works, that if Iran's able to slip a few drones or even just a few rockets, a few missiles, or the Houthis into those oil fields, they're so large, you're not going to be able to effectively protect them completely from the air. And they only need a couple of hits in for that entire oil field to potentially go up in flames. And so this gets into the asymmetrical warfare threats in the Middle East. Jack Posobiec, right back. Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily.
Influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec. We are back live here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. And, folks, we know that America is turning 250, and we're not celebrating weakness right now. We're celebrating freedom, America's freedom. We're talking about strength. We're talking about the greatest country in the world. And here's the crazy part. 250 years later, we're still drinking whatever the government decides to put in our water. Fluoride for your teeth, chlorine to keep things clean. And that's not a decision that I want someone else making for my family. That's why I use Cove Pure to purify my water. More than 200 million Americans are on fluoridated water, and the latest JAMA Pediatrics review found that fluoride exposure was associated actually with lower IQ scores in children. Though the evidence is strongest in higher exposure studies. And chlorine, well, when it reacts with organic material in water, it can create disinfection byproducts like THMs, which regulate monitor, because some are considered possible or probable carcinogens. Now, some states have moved on this, but that takes time. Meanwhile, your family is drinking this water today, but not my family, because the Poso family does Cove Pure. My kids, believe it or not, they call it super water, and they love it. They've been drinking it all summer. Cove Pure says its system removes a wide range of contaminants, including chlorine and microplastics, and its site says it's built to deliver cleaner, better-tasting water on demand. I love how easy Cove Pure is to use, by the way. My kids love it. My kids can use it, how great the water tastes. We call it super water, and the peace of mind it gives me knowing I'm in control of what my family drinks. So don't wait for the government to catch up. Take back control of your water. And in honor of America's 250th, Cove Pure is giving the Human Events audience $250 off when you use our link, Cove Pure. That's COVEPURE.com/POSO. CovePure.com/POSO. All right, we're back on with Trace Gallagher. And Trace, I was so excited to hear this, that you have a new book coming out.
I do, and thank you for helping me promote it, Jack. It's called, turns out they were right all along, and the subtitle is Life Lessons That I Learned, ... eventually, because, I pick up things kind of slow. It's true. The story is about
Sometimes
me.
the uptake is a little,
Yeah, I'm a little slow, but when I get something, I never let go. So, the stories are about me, but the stories are also about people that had an enormous impact on me. Some of them are famous. A lot of the names people will recognize, and some of them won't. You won't know them, but you will get to know all of these people and kind of realize that they were pretty savvy. You know, whether it's the greatest basketball coach who ever lived in John Wooden and the advice that he gave me, and, you know, a guy who made the biggest Hollywood deals on record would give me some advice. And yeah, you just kind of, sometimes you accept it and sometimes you pass it off. There's stories in there about, you know, teaching Jimmy Buffett how to water ski back in the day. And I used to be a professional water skier, and, you know, just interesting stories. And the takeaway from all of them is that, you know, what's interesting about life is that you kind of go by the 5 F's, right? Which is faith, family, friends, fortitude, and fun. And you can't get from 1 to 5. You can't get from to fun until you have the base, which is the faith, your family, your friends, surrounding yourself with good people. Fortitude, because you need the courage, Jack, as you attest to on your show and in your life every day. You need the courage to be able to try things, to be able to do things, to be able to go out and do the right things. And you need that support system to be successful in going out and doing that. And then eventually you can achieve the results and the goals that you want. And there's also stories in this book about the early years of Fox News Channel. And it's interesting to a lot of people. I was one of the first correspondents hired by Fox News back in 1996. And the funny thing about the story is that I went into New York during my job interview in the summer of 1996, and I met with Roger Ailes. And Roger Ailes, you know, was in his office, and he'd have like 3 or 4 televisions in there. And Roger would tell me, he said, "Listen, Trace, I want to let you know that we really like your tape. We really like you on camera." He says, "But I got to tell you," he said, "I don't like all that damn curly hair. I don't like the curly hair. The curly hair distracts people." And I'd look at him like, are you kidding me? It just doesn't look good. He goes, "I'm going to tell you a story, Tracy, but I watch television with the sound down." And he goes, "When I see something that kind of catches my eye, I turn the sound up." And I'm looking at him, and he says, "And you know what? When I see curly hair, I almost never want to turn the sound up." So the tease on this is that in the book, you will find out how Trace Gallagher, the 1996 version of Trace Gallagher, actually made Roger Ailes turn the sound up on the television, curly hair and all. And it's true, and that's kind of what the book is all about, Jack.
Well, that's just such a great story, and I've got to read that part. You know, we should pull up a pic, guys. Let's find an old picture of Trace while he's on. You know, with sort of the So you were like out of Point Break, basically, right? You know,
I mean, that's the whole
like,
thing.
I don't know if you're more Swayze than Keanu, I suppose.
I said that I go out, listen, I can do whatever I want. I can cut my hair. I just don't know what to do with it. It's just all I have. I mean, it's kind of my hair. So it's gonna, get longer and shorter, and I'll do whatever I can. And, eventually I won him over, and it's been 30 years of Fox News Channel, and it's been a great run. In fact, the 30th anniversary is October 7th of this year. So it's been quite the ride, Jack, but the book is kind of a little bit about everything.
But it goes to show you, right, that this is also that's a lesson, right? That's a lesson in how people perceive and receive information. It's a lesson in optics. It's a lesson in just if you're doing media, if you're in this world, or lots of people who are trying to start out with social media these days, TikTok and other things. That's something to think about. Is, you know, you might think, well, this is how I look, but are you thinking about how someone else, the audience, right, is perceiving that? So even that is a great example. Now, I just want to be clear. So you're saying that if I read the book, I'll be able to, I will also be able to become a waterboarder a water surfer. I've already done the waterboarding at Gitmo. Because, you know, as a Polish guy, my skills on the water surfing aren't so great.
Well, neither were Jimmy Buffett's, just so you're in good company there, because, you know, neither were his skills on the water very good. But yeah, it's the part and parcel of, you know, the bigger picture, which is fundamentals of life really help everybody, Jack. And no matter where you start or what you want to do, the fundamentals are the best way. It's John Wooden's advice to me, which said, you know, of all the things you wanted him to teach you how to dribble, and you wanted all the insight of the greatest college basketball coach ever, because I was a crappy basketball player. And John Wooden literally got up to the microphone and he said, you know, boys, sit down, take off your shoes and socks. You should have 2 pairs of socks. You put the first pair on the right way, and you put the second pair on inside out. If you do that, you will never get blisters. You cannot play basketball.
Trace, the book is amazing. It is called Turns Out They Were Right All Along. Trace, God bless, and thanks so much for coming on and joining us today.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, check it out, folks. Folks, check the book out wherever book. I believe it's out for pre-order right now, and you'll be able to get it everywhere very soon. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily.
Where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily. Folks, in a world that is constantly changing, some things never, ever do. And those are our values, the values we choose to live by, our faith, our family, our freedom. And believe it or not, even your own, something like your wireless provider can even reflect those values. That's what Patriot Mobile has stood for more than 12 years. They serve Americans who want their dollars supporting the Christian conservative movement and organizations defending faith, family, and freedom. Making the switch is simple. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade to a new device. Their 100% US-based customer support team can have you connected in minutes. If you're still paying off your current phone, they can even help with a contract buyout. Patriot Mobile also gives you premium priority access across all 3 major US networks. So you will get dependable nationwide coverage without compromising your principles. If it matters who you trust with your service and where your money goes, it's time for Patriots to make the switch. So all Patriots, go to patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code POSO to get a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT. Make the switch today. Very excited now to have on someone that you all know. First time on the program. Folks, it is Trace Gallagher. You know him, of course, as the host of Late News, and he's the author of the new book, Turns Out They Were Right All Along. Trace, how are you?
Jack, I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show. I very much appreciate it. I was enthralled by the big burrito intro, the burrito beef, as we were talking about, because you're exactly right. It is this entire concept of, they're taking this Taco Bell stuff and they're saying, yeah, back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, you can get tacos for 39 cents and 79 cents and $1, and you get, they had combinations you could do for $2. You get drinks and an extra, quesadilla or whatever. And it was true. And I was saying, we do this on the show a lot. Before COVID, I had the receipt in my pocket that was $9.90 for this burrito that I would get across the street a lot. And then after COVID, that same burrito, same ingredients was $15.50. And you think that is an incredible rise in prices in just a short span of time. But when these socialists, democratic socialists, are trying to sell you their spiel of, oh, no, we're gonna make things affordable, we're gonna get the prices down, they forget that it was their side that brought the prices up. And getting prices down is easier said than done. I mean, if you take eggs, everybody can promise to get eggs down in 6 months because chickens produce eggs all the time. But when you're talking about beef and other stuff, it's going to take a while because you can only grow the cow so fast. You can only turn these contracts so fast. So turning these massive ships, when you're talking about prices, is going to take a little while, Jack, because that's kind of the way the economy works. And I think these socialists, what they leave out of all of their hype about they're gonna give you free health care, it's gonna be great, is the fact that when they talk about Medicare for all, they're also talking about private insurance for none, because Medicare takes everything, and everybody's got to wait in line 6 months to get a checkup, and then everybody's taxes are going to go way up. That's the way this whole thing works, which is why we still have private insurance, because it is the best system available. And I don't think the Republicans have done enough to hammer that point home. Is they want to open the prisons. They want your private insurance to go away. They want to open the prisons. They want to get rid of police. They want to get rid of ICE. And you think, why are you so in favor of criminals? And yet you're not in favor of Israel. What is going on why is the hate pointed in certain directions and not other directions? And I would love for somebody from the DSA, or even supported by the DSA or DSA candidates like Abdul El Sayed and get an explanation, and you never get it. All you get is the talking points of how they're going to lower everything, how they're going to make, America into this utopia where we all shop at the same stores and it's 30% less and we're going to do it all for you. And they know it's BS, and everybody knows it's BS, but people are falling for it because people love headlines and they hate to read the actual text because it's too much damn work.
No, they do, and they know that every single time this has ever been tried anywhere around the world. I come from a Polish family. Believe me, the Poles will tell you right now that it does not work. And the Poles were very, very excited to get their freedom back in the 1990s, 1991. Actually, funny enough, I believe 1991 is exactly when that Taco Bell commercial came out. So, it's sort of this tie between the cheap burritos, the fall of communism, the systems. They fall apart. And in fact, I don't believe Taco Bell, but I know sort of McDonald's and Burger King. These were some of the franchises that were opening up after the Berlin Wall came down, after the Iron Curtain came down. They were starting to open up. And people really viewed those as ways to, become more in the modern world. Now, that being said, I do actually, if I'm in Poland, I'm probably not going to be ordering tacos and burritos, but, I'm probably going to go for Polish food. But it speaks to the wider point of what we're saying, that these systems sound good when they're when they're promoted. They never tell you about the downsides, and they know that it doesn't work because it's been tried again and again, because they don't care. What they ultimately care about is power. What they ultimately care about is the power over your country, the power over your decisions, the power over corporations, economy, as you say, the police, the prisons. They want total power. All the other stuff that doesn't even enter into the equation. And, actually, it's interesting, and because one of the pieces which did lead to all of this, of course, was COVID. And I think the disastrous response of the Biden administration and the lockdowns by so many blue governors that led to all of this inflation. And we just saw the news, and Trace, I had to get your take on this, first bite at the apple, that we just saw that Dr. Fauci, the guy who led the response to all of this, that a lot of people are saying, you know what, that guy needs some accountability. He has just been held in contempt from the Senate committee. And it was this situation where he refused to answer any questions. Now, people say, well, what about the Fifth Amendment? He had a pardon, though. So if he has a pardon, does the Fifth Amendment apply? This is actually contempt. And Trace, I wanted you to weigh in on that because, again, what are we talking about? Centralized government power, one person making decisions for everyone. Sounds a lot like socialism.
Which is why you have the liberal media, Jack, that's actually, fighting this and standing up for Fauci, because they were complicit. They are the ones that helped him do his. And in turn, we found out from his diary that he was literally enthralled by the media, man. He loved the attention. He wrote about the attention. And every single day, one of his first entries was, oh, man, they want me on this show. And, I've become famous across. And the fame took him out of the mission, took him away from the goal, which was to actually guide people in the proper direction during COVID. And in that goal, Fauci forgot about other opinions and other people. In fact, he demeaned the Jay Bhattacharya's of the world. He demeaned these people as being irrelevant. When they wrote the Great Barrington Debate, and they were talking about, differing ways to handle COVID, and let's not focus as much on vaccines and putting people inside. We need to really focus on putting the elderly, the people who are sick and vulnerable, putting them aside and letting everybody else kind of live their lives, because this is going to be the best thing. And the left shut that narrative down. And every time someone tried to bring it in, and we saw this, social media shut it down. The liberal media shut it down. They were all complicit in this, and Fauci was their hero because he went along with it. He's the one that bragged about the governor of California, took his advice and shut down the schools and shut down the shops and shut down any, non-essential business, and how he also convinced the governor or the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, to shut down the schools. So he did that knowing that this was not the right move. And then later he said, I had nothing to do with shutting down the schools. Oh, yes, you did. And you wrote about it. And that's why we wanted answers. And the 111 times that he took to fifth, was a slap in the face to everybody who had to sit behind glass, Jack, and watch their loved ones die because you could not go in because it was some ridiculous law or rule that you could not go in and actually hug or spend time with a loved one who was dying because of COVID. They made these draconian rules. People lost their livelihoods, their jobs, their military service because they would not take the vaccine. And we now, realize that they told us, oh, if you take the vaccine, it's going to stop the spread. No, it's not going to stop the spread. Didn't stop you from spreading, didn't stop you from getting. And they didn't tell us that until after all the controversy was starting to wind down. They screwed up COVID, and Fauci is emblematic of that screw up. And they refuse to say, you know what, we got it wrong, we're sorry. And Fauci, saying nothing 111 times is part and parcel of that bigger picture.
Well, and I don't usually tell this story publicly, but perhaps I should since it's come back in the news. So we had our second kid, and it was December of 2020. So kind of the height of these COVID restrictions. And first of all, they tried to tell me that I couldn't be in the room. Because and believe it or not, we had both tested positive. I said, well, if we're both positive, what's the difference? And we had it before, so that wasn't even a strong case. But they said, well, you can't even be in the room. Then they said that I wasn't allowed to leave and come back. So if I wanted to, go get my wife something from the store, pregnant women sometimes get urges and cravings. I don't know if people have ever had a pregnant wife before, but sometimes they want something, and as the dad, you can do that. And then the very last bit, they tried to tell my wife that she had to wear a mask while she was giving birth. Let me tell you something, Trey. She took one look at them and said, if you try to put that over my face, something is going to happen to you, because no, I need to be able to breathe, because we're going to make sure everything comes out all right. And it was perfect. It was a wonderful birth, but I will never forget that. I'll never forget that. And Fauci is the face of it. That was socialism. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily with Trace Gallagher.
This is what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
Minnesota has reported attacks on roughly 30 water systems, while Michigan has confirmed 9 incidents, 7 states in total. The FBI has warned that Iranian-affiliated cyber actors are targeting internet-connected industrial control systems used by U.S. critical infrastructure, including water and wastewater facilities. But until this point, the White House has tried to avoid blaming Iran.
We heard in Minnesota there was a cyber attack, and they blame it on Iran. I don't think so. I think I blame it on Minnesota because they're grossly incompetent.
On this vote, the yeas are 8, the nays are 5, and the motion is agreed to.
The Senate Homeland Security Committee voted to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt for his testimony last week, where he refused to answer questions. He cited the Fifth Amendment, the right to not incriminate himself, more than 100 times. The committee voted to hold him in contempt for that testimony or lack of testimony. Now it will be up to the Justice Department, presumably, to decide whether to prosecute.
After a string of primary wins in very blue states, I might add, the Democratic Socialists of America are increasingly becoming a political force.
The base of the Democratic Party just wants radicals. It wants these DSA types. It wants people who hate even the idea of private property ownership. But it also, I think, tells us that that particular set of ideas is very popular in places you wouldn't expect. Because outside, he's this guy who holds himself out as a working class hero, as a guy who's going to fight for the working class. How does he fight for the working class? By flooding his state and his country with low-wage immigrants.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. Today is August 6, 2026, Anno Domini. And folks, we are in the midst of a socialist revolution. Now, you might say, oh, but Jack, socialism sucks. Oh, but Jack, I don't want to be in a socialist revolution. Well, unfortunately, the socialists are not listening to you. They're not listening to me either. Believe me, I've tried. I don't know if they're just dumb. I don't know if they're just tone deaf. But I do know this, that they are finding things, emotional triggers, that make people upset. And one of those things that a lot of people are upset about right now, believe it or not, online and across the country, is, of course, the cost of living. It's now, in some polls, being seen as the number one issue in the 2026 midterm elections. And I'm not even entirely sure how it all got started. I was talking about gas prices earlier this week. And then last week I was sort of got into it with Kevin O'Leary and his gold Rolex, a $2 million Rolex. And I said, you can't be bragging about stuff like that and going on and talking like that if you want to win politically and if you don't want to upset these people. But somehow we got on the topic of burritos. Yes, we got on the topic of burritos. And of course, my friend Andrew Colvett from Turning Point USA came in on this, and JD Vance came in on this. But I did want to go in and talk about all this because it's very similar to what I was talking about in terms of having an economic system that serves the national good and having an economic system that understands the needs of the people first. And burritos sort of became this proxy system for debating all of this. And we're all sort of debating burritos. So I wanted to go back, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to go back to an old video, an old advertisement, actually, from everyone's favorite, those authentic Mexican cuisine connoisseurs over at Taco Bell. Guys, let's play it. Like that. Look at those prices. So good, so good. Guys, 79 cents. 89 cents, 99 cents for a taco and for a soft taco. This was in living memory. I can certainly remember this when I was in high school. So that would be the 2000s, right? Everybody can remember the dollar menu at McDonald's. Everyone can remember the value menu at Taco Bell. And this is something, again, it's not that long ago. And people will say, well, you could still find cheap stuff, or other people are saying, there's this debate, well, just make stuff at home. If you just make stuff at home, it's going to be cheaper. I know it's cheaper if you make stuff at home. That's not the point, though. The point is that when you're in one of these political debates and you're up against socialists, the socialists are going to be saying, we will make things cheaper. Or in the case of Mandami, give stuff away for free. And what did Barra say yesterday on the program? He said, you're never going to make people more afraid of socialism than they are of not being able to pay their bills. They're never going to be more afraid of socialism than they are of being afraid of not being able to feed their children. And that's the situation. That's the situation, and that's why I contend the socialists are on the rise. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily.